Hi everyone, welcome to the Real Estate Tax Tips channel. My name is Cherry Chen. I am a chartered professional accountant located in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And I am on a mission to become the Google map for hardworking Canadians seeking financial freedom. And today we are very honored to have Quentin D Souza here with me. A mentor of mine for a number of years. So very exciting to have you. Why don't I have you introduce yourself?
All right. Thanks, Cherry. I appreciate you letting me come out here. And I love your setup. This is super awesome. And Adam's pretty cool too, behind the scenes. But, I've been investing in real estate since 2004. I've written, 6 books.
I know, crazy.
I run a real estate club in the Durham region. I've invested in 1 to 4 unit properties, multifamily buildings. Currently have about 125 million in assets. Just continue to grow. I really enjoy traveling and I enjoy talking about real estate. And it's great that I can talk to you because my wife is tired of hearing me.
Well, it's been like 18 years, right? Talking about real estate nonstop.
Yeah.
So before real estate, what were you doing before?
I was a teacher. So I worked in Toronto. I was a public school teacher. I taught elementary school and I ended up taking my master's in education. I have my principal qualification. And in 2013, I needed to make a decision whether I continued to go down the route of becoming a vice principal or principal superintendent or, just focus on my real estate investing. And in 2013, my kids were small at the time. And, my wife was very supportive. She said, go do it. And so I quit my job and I focused on real estate full time.
What?
And
you quit your pension?
Yeah. In 2013, I changed direction of what I was doing. And it was the best decision. I wish I had done it earlier. But, hindsight is always 20/20. And I had created enough income from my real estate portfolio that allowed me to quit my job. And, I ended up doing, like, the year I quit my job, I did like 12 house flips. I did just continued to grow. I did coaching at the time because people were all asking me, how did you do this? So I did a bunch of different things. And then, I just continued on that path. And then I started to invest in 2015, like multifamily properties. And I continued to grow that and learn. But yeah, I was a teacher before and still, it was great and I still enjoy teaching, hence books. But
it's quite a collection here.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think for me as well, I'm hoping that my kids who are starting to show interest in real estate investing, if one day I'm not there, that they can pick up a book and hear my voice, right? And be able to share with them what I've learned. And so each one of the books is a bit of a roadmap for them to do what I did, whether it's the same or they take a different path. At least I have something out there that they can come back and learn from. So that's the idea. Yeah.
Yes, I never thought to write my book for my kids at all. At all, zero. It's hard for me to link my taxes and then my kids together because it's too far out.
Yeah, for me it was, the first book was great because I did it with my friends Andrew Brennan and Jeff Woods. And it was a little bit more challenging because it was all 3 of us together. Yeah. But then after that, it was more like, okay, this is how you do property management. This is how you fill vacancies. This is how you find off-market properties. This is how you scale up, right? This is how I created, my net worth and how I continue to grow and how I do my goal setting. So all of that were
all
books.
In here.
Yeah,
yes.
That's right.
So can I step back to ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
I work with a lot of real estate investors and a lot of them are trying to quit their job. And it was not obviously the market has gone crazy. It come down a little bit, but the interest rate has gone up too. So it kind of cancel out some of the cash flow that they would expect with the rent increase. My question to you is, at the time, I'm sure you face similar challenge. At the time when you make the decision to quit your job, what was going through your mind?
Well, I was scared.
Let's step back. How old were your kids at the time?
Ooh, okay, so this would have been 9 years ago. So my kids would be 9 and 5,
Were
right?
you the sole breadwinner?
No, my wife was a teacher as well, and so she had an income coming in from the teaching. And what I had actually done the year before I quit my job is I banked my paycheck and I just used the income from the portfolio to demonstrate to her that I was able to do this, right?
Yep.
And so I kind of like proof of concept. And then after that, I really did, like I did the flips
Yeah.
because I was like, okay, I quit my job and I better start to do something, right?
Yeah.
And I ended up on my first flip, which is like in July of that year, I actually made more money on my first flip than I did the whole year income wise. I made over 100,000 on the flip,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
And so it was just like, well, maybe I should have done this before. And I guess the thing was I did have the passive income coming from the portfolio that people talk about, but I supplemented it with active income, which
Yeah.
was the flips. And what I learned was that I actually gave myself a bigger job than I had before because I had taken on all of these active flips. And then that's when I started to reposition the funds that I had acquired from the flips and started putting them into multifamily properties. And that was like in 2015. And the flips and then some of my other active income that I was generating on top of my real estate portfolio. And then I started to buy those buildings. And what I found with the buildings, which is a little different, is that I was able to refinance those a lot easier. What ends up happening to people who, let's say they've built a bunch of 1 to 4 unit properties, they have equity that they get from their 1 to 4 unit properties, but it's often trapped because they debt coverage ratio out on the refinance,
Yep.
right? They're like the only time that they can actually, they might have a property, say it's worth 1 million and they have a mortgage of 3 million, or sorry, 300,000, but the bank's only going to give them another 100,000.
Yeah.
And so they have 600,000 in equity. And that is really related to the fact that it's a 1 to 4 unit property. What happens that's different in the multifamily space is that the value of the property is based on the net operating income. And the net operating income allows you to extract equity a lot easier. So that same property, as long as there's the net operating income that's available and the cap rate makes sense, you're able to extract that equity out and then reinvest it into different projects. You can reuse that capital. So I learned from that 6 unit property that I bought in 2015, this is a way better way of doing it. I still owned a lot of 1 to 4 unit properties, but I started to sell off more and more of them because I realized that it makes more sense for me to be in the larger buildings.
So would you say the numbers that you are seeing in the larger multifamily units are much easier or much more lucrative than the single family home, or is it just the refinancing part that makes it easier, or what are the challenges or benefits?
Well, I would say that for everybody to start off in the 1 to 4 unit space, I don't suggest this to go right to apartment buildings. Maybe that's for some people, but for the majority of people, you should start in the 1 to 4 unit space. It's a good way to get an understanding of how property management works. It's a good way of understanding how the finance system and banking works. You can take on partners in that 1 to 4 unit space the same way as you might do in larger buildings. It's a good way of getting your feet wet. The challenge is always going to be refinancing in 1 to 4 units because you're dealing with banks who are going to qualify you on income, right? And maybe you'll get some that qualify you on the property itself, but you're always going to tap out. You're never going to be able to access the equity in the same way. I mean, you can access it by using a second mortgage maybe, but it becomes more expensive money.
Yep.
When you're looking at growth after you've gotten, let's say, maybe it's financial freedom based on that 1 to 4 units, and you've got, let's say, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month coming from that, then it's much easier for you to go into the the 5+ unit space, because you're gaining net worth a lot faster. It's not as much a cash flow play, although all our buildings are cash flow positive. What ends up happening is that the value of the building is based on the income that you're able to get. So, for example, we just yesterday we paid a tenant to leave $2,800. Okay, so a lot of people will be like, "Oh, you paid them $2,800. You shouldn't have to do that." All right, whatever. I can tell you that rent is going from $600 a month to $1,600 a month.
Wow.
Okay.
The payback is 3 months.
Right. Not only that, but it's not the payback that you have to take a look at. So let's say now that's an additional $1,000 a month based on net operating income. So if you take 1,000, multiply that by 12, and divide it by the cap rate, right? So maybe this is a number that everybody should be. So if you did that, 1,000 divided by 0.04, you're looking at the
12,000.
Yeah.
12,000, because it's 1,000 times 12, right?
Yeah, 1,000 times 12 divided by the cap rate, which is 0.4.
Yep.
So that means you're adding $300,000 to the value of the building. Like, who wouldn't pay $2,800?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's the difference between multifamily and single family, right? In the 1 to 4 unit space. It's based on net operating income. It doesn't matter what the property across the street sold for, which is what happens in the 1 to 4 unit. It's based on the comparative model, right?
Yep.
What a property sold for. The commercial properties, 5+ units, are based on the income model. Right? They will use a comparative model because they'll look at what the other cap rates are. But really, it's based on your net operating income, right?
So speaking of the net operating income, like, what are your tips on like managing these multi-unit? Because do you have a crew on your own, or are you still leveraging subcontractor? Because it's essentially a lot of buildings. It's $120 million, let's face it, $120 million asset under management. That's a lot of management.
All right. I guess it just depends on if you're doing it or not. Like, I'm not in the day-to-day in the same way as I would be if I were the only property manager, right? So it always depends on where the buildings are located and how many units we have in a particular area. So, for example, in Northumberland, I have a third-party manager, and I believe it's like maybe 35 units that are there, because I just don't have the scale in that area to have like a satellite management type of office. In the Kingston area, it's like 300 units that are there. We actually have a property management company that's there with a renovation company. We're vertically integrated in that market, right? And then in the Durham region, we have like just over 100 units, right? So I have a property manager and an administrator that does the day-to-day. So it depends on where they're located and how many units are there. It allows us to be able to scale differently. So what I would encourage people to do is move away from self-management. Yes. Because what you've done is you're taking on a hobby. Right? And this isn't a hobby. This is a business. So make it a business. Have a property manager. At the beginning, like I said before, start out with doing it yourself, understanding, get to a certain size. And then maybe after you've got, 3 or 4 units or 3 or 4 buildings or whatever it is, you start to hire it out, because you don't want to be in the day-to-day. I thought when I first got started, I was like, oh man, I got to be the person that does all this. That was a mistake. It was a mistake. These property management books are like a testimony of doing that. I wrote all the systems. Now I have all the systems, and I give it to the property manager to do.
That's great.
Right?
I need to give this to my assistant.
That's exactly what it is.
Yep.
The intention of the first book, the Property Management Toolbox book, it's like how to manage properties, and it's kind of morbid, but the reason why I wrote the book was like to explain to my wife, if I'm gone, this is how you manage the properties.
That was the trigger to write that book.
And now it's like, she's not going to be involved in the property
Yep.
management at all, because we have professional management that is, I have a partner that does operations, right? Like that,
Yeah.
that's what they do.
Absolutely.
And it's very different. But start off with that. Yes. Understand it.
You've done your single family home 1 to 4 unit, and then you've done some flips to generate active business income, and now you're on to large multi-family unit purchase and investment as well. So we're on a tech show. So let's tie it back to your initial structure to now. Like, it must have evolved over time as well.
Yeah, I started off with owning quite a few properties personally with my wife. What we ended up doing eventually is have a holding company. And then we did a Section 85 rollover of a few assets into the holding company.
Yep.
And it allowed us to extract equity too, because of the values of the purchase price versus the Section 85 rollover. So that was which was good. Now, when we're doing asset purchases, often we're creating a new corporation that owns the asset, and then the holding company owns the shares in that new corporation.
So have you been using this, because I've got quite a few people asking us questions. Have you been using GPLP structure in terms of raising funds?
So the GPLP structure for financing of apartment buildings is something that is commonly used. The problem is that most financing is going to require that the LPs give personal guarantees.
All of them too. Yes.
So what is the point of an LPGP?
Yeah, I agree. But I wanted you to tell me and then see if you have any other insights.
I think that the LPGPs make sense if you have like 10, 20 investors that you're trying to pull together to purchase some sort of asset. I just think that's messy, and I don't think I would want to do that. Like, you're going to deal with, like, the type of people that you deal with really affects how your success is going to be. I only deal with accredited investors. I cannot deal with anybody else, mostly because they're writing larger checks. Like, I'm not going to take a check from somebody that's under like $125,000-$150,000. And usually those people, when you're writing bigger checks, you're able to have less people into a deal, which is usually makes it easier for to hold it within a corporation. And then that corporation will have shares, and those shares will be owned by the holding companies of the investors, right? And I know that there is a lot of people that go around touting LPGPs, which I think is fine for some people. I just found that a lot of the financing that's out there usually requires those LPs to give personal guarantees. So it kind of defeats the purpose.
Earlier on, I had the same experience. Earlier on in my career, I was involved in managing a bunch of commercial plazas, and the structure was LP and GP. And during refinancing time, the financial institution, I think at the time was Manulife, was requiring all the LP to be personally guaranteeing a commercial plaza's loan. That kind of defeat the whole purpose of having that structure, right? LP means limited liability partner, so you don't want to be involved. And then, so...
I mean, there's different ways to do it too. Like, if you think about it, you are the person borrowing. So in that case, the GPs of that deal should have approached Manulife and said, okay, but we want to segment the guarantee, and that 90% comes from the GP or the person operating, or however it worked, and then 10% of that guarantee goes to the LPs, right? So you could segment it, and through some negotiation with the lender. Most people don't know that you can negotiate that. Yes.
With that type of deals, for sure. Typically, day-to-day retail, residential, there's very little wiggle room in terms of negotiation.
No. And then commercial, like within commercial, you can actually, like, if you develop a track record. So sometimes when I'm doing purchases, my partners aren't doing personal guarantees. I'm like like the main operator is doing the guarantee, and that's sufficient because they see the size of the existing assets that I own. They see my net worth, and that's often more than enough for them on the personal guarantee side, so that my the other partners aren't actually doing a personal guarantee.
Passive investor, yeah.
Also, when you're doing conventional mortgages, it depends on who the lender is. Sometimes a conventional mortgage will say, like, look, if they have more than a 15% equity stake, then they have to give a personal guarantee. And that sometimes happens with LPs as well in the GP LP structure. So it could be a way if you keep it down to a certain size, but then you're dealing with a lot more people. I'm trying to make my life less complex,
yes,
not more,
I agree,
right?
100%. So I think from an accounting point of view, I always see people would tell me, our clients would come to us and say, oh, I have 2 joint venture or 5 joint venture properties. The level of complexities of the accounting when you have 5 joint venture properties inside the same corporation, or like you own 5 limited partners investment, and then I have to do a consolidation of 5, like 15%, 10% of that property investment in your corporation is a lot harder than just doing, hey, I have one corporation that owns that 35 units that you mentioned, and the accounting and the tax would be so much simpler by just doing that company's tax return. There's no reconciliation required. So much easier.
Yeah, and that's the reason why we do that as well. And also from a financing perspective, when you go to get new financing, you're looking at the corporation. You're not looking at all of the other pieces, which makes it a lot more complex. It's cleaner.
Oh, for sure. I 100% agree as an accountant.
There we go.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, Quentin, to share your wealth of knowledge with
welcome.
our audience.
And if they want to reach out to me, they can go to QuentinDSouza.com.
Yes, thank you. For those of you who haven't subscribed to our channel, make sure you give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so then you can stay on top of our latest tax tip. Until next time, thank you.